Hello, Michael here with another Renderman 22 tutorial. Today we're going to be having a look, we're going to be having our first look at AOVs with Z-depth, and I'm going to be compositing it in Nuke, because I know most of you guys use Nuke. I can do one for Fusion if anyone wants, but this will be the Nuke one. So I've already got a scene set up here, just for your reference. This is what the final render looks like, and our goal is to export this as a batch render with a Z-depth AOV, and then we can use that Z-depth to create things like atmosphere, or in this case we're just going to use it to do a defocus or depth of field. So first thing we're going to do is go into our render settings. Under the AOV tab, we want to first select your beauty layer, and then we'll just scroll down on the left here till you find Z, and we're going to click this button here. That's just going to add a Z channel into the beauty layer. So when we render this out, our variance output, which is essentially the output that's got your diffuse and specular channel all built into it, is also going to include Z depth. I'm also going to have denoise on because I just want to show you a little bit of something once we get into Nuke. And then once you've done that, that's essentially all you need to do. So we can close that, and then we can go to Renderman, and we can batch render. I'll just make sure I will mention here also, if you haven't already, make sure you go into your preferences, change your spool style to rib. I think I should have mentioned this in the batch rendering tutorial, but if you're having problems batch rendering, that's probably the thing that will fix it. Alright, so once that's finished, it will be in your directory, the path to your renders, usually in your images folder in your project by default. You should have already set your project if you are doing batch rendering. So we will open up Nuke, and just here in Windows Explorer I've got both of the outputs. So the variance is the non-denoised version and the filtered is the denoised version. So I'm just going to drag and drop those into Nuke, and we're going to work on the variance to start with, which is this one here. So you'll see that's what the render looks like. This is just a low quality render. I think it was like 32 samples. And we're just going to hit tab and type in defocus. The defocus will come up. Now, because if you look at, I can show you with a shuffle node. So if you have a look in the shuffle, those are all the channels that it's output with that variance output. So you can see in there it's got depth, but we don't need the shuffle node, so we're just going to use the Z defocus. With it selected, you'll want to have the depth channel set to depth Z. We're going to set the math to depth, and then we're just going to drag the focal point wherever we want to. And you can see that the small robot's going to be in focus, and then I'll just get it out of focus there in the background. And you can check your output with your focal plane setup. So if you want to increase or decrease your depth of field, maybe increase the size of it, and then you can just go back to your result, and you can see that, or you can work in result. Right, so that is fine. But if you wanted to use the filtered version, you'll see that it's come with RGB and depth. If I plug that in to my Z defocus, one of the things you'll notice is you'll start to get a bit of transparency in parts of your mesh, and also some sort of clipping, and that's because of the way the denoise works. So essentially it's a Gaussian filter, which is going to do a really good job of smoothing out all your noise. As you can see there in the eyes and the dark areas, it's completely gotten rid of all the noise, and it's still retained its sharpness. However, when you're using it as a filter for Z depth, you're going to run into these sorts of errors. As you can see, even the grass in the foreground starts to look a bit crazy. As you can see there, that's not a really good calculation of what it should look like. So that's what it should actually look like. So you'll want to start thinking about if you're going to be using denoise render layers and that sort of thing, because the denoised Z filter is obviously going to cause you some problems. I really haven't gone in to try rendering out at much higher sample rate, so you might have less problems with a higher sample rate. I rendered up to 128 before with like 0.01 pixel variance, and I was still running into these problems. So I would probably just be doing a composite with, if you really needed denoise, putting it on a separate render layer, and then denoising whatever you needed to denoise. But when you're using depth of field, you can actually get away with quite a bit. The rest you might need to do with sampling. But yeah, that is pretty much the way to do it, and that is a pretty good introduction on AOVs as well. I'll probably do a more extensive AOV tutorial in the future. Maybe next week. I'll see how I go for time. But if there are any other tutorials you would like to see, make sure you request them in the comments below. And if you did like the tutorial, make sure you click like so other people can find it on YouTube. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, as I do a tutorial a week on average for all sorts of 3D software like Renderman and Mara, all that sort of thing. If you'd like to keep up to date with my work, check out the Instagram link in the description, as well as the Facebook if you want to keep even more up to date. That's it for this one though. Thank you very much for watching, and happy rendering.